Hello, and welcome to another day of English 2. I'm your online teacher, Miss Abear. Yesterday, we started a new unit about lab-grown meat, and this is a National Writing Project argument unit. So, as a reminder, the National Writing Project is an organization of teachers who have gone through this intensive professional development, and they learn how to teach students how to be community engagers, how to communicate and engage with the community. And so this unit is an informational unit about lab-grown meat to inform you about what it is that you are eating or potentially may eat. And so as a consumer in a community, you should be aware of these things. And so this is an informative unit, and at the end, you will be writing an argument unit, and we will get there and I will give you all of the information that you need in order to be successful on this unit. So yesterday you read an infographic and you began writing about your thoughts on the idea of lab-grown meat. Today we're going to get a little more information and give you some strategies to use as you begin kind of processing through your thoughts on this topic. So today's text is "From Farm to Table, Will Cell-Cultured Meat Win Over Americans?" Now, your teacher should give you a copy of this article, and that article will be linked in the YouTube description, so know that. As we read, or as I read to you, and later you might read some pieces with a partner, but as we read, I want you to code your text. So I want you to put an asterisk next to these ideas that are key insights from that article. And then I want you to put an F beside the facts about lab-grown meat, or the facts that seem important or compelling to you. So think about that as we read together, and I do expect you to follow along as we read together. So let's get started. Alt Meat is having quite a moment. California-based Beyond Meat, one of the world's biggest plant-based meat companies, this week had the strongest stock market debut of any company this year. IKEA announced a meatless version of its Swedish meatballs, and Burger King said it will roll out a version of its signature Whopper made with Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat's chief competitor, nationwide by the end of the year. But conventional animal agriculture faces an even bigger threat than plant-based patties. This one comes from Petri dishes. Companies in the United States and abroad are moving quickly to bring to market hamburgers and other meat, poultry, and seafood products derived from muscle tissue grown in a lab with cells harvested from a living animal. U.S. regulators will introduce rules for such products later this year, and companies say they are poised to launch their first commercial products within the same time frame. Like the introduction of genetically modified foods before it, cell-cultured meat has the potential to transform how the world eats. And as with genetically modified foods, there probably will be pushback. Plant-based meat, while growing in popularity, still largely appeals to the tiny fractions of Americans who are vegetarians and vegans. If lab meats can replicate the taste and texture of traditional meat at a lower cost and with fewer downsides, it would be a game changer for global nutrition. I'm going to stop here because I have questions, and I'm going to show you my handout, and you can see I've highlighted and I've written some things in the margins. That's what you should be doing as well. But one of the things I want to draw your attention to is the quote that says, derived from muscle tissue grown in a lab with cells harvested from a living animal. Okay, so keep that idea, harvested from a living animal. And then later on it says this idea of Americans who are vegetarians and vegans. Well, let me give you a little bit of information about vegetarians and vegans and what's the difference between the two. Because when I taught this unit in my classroom, that was the very first question, is what's the difference between a vegan and a vegetarian? So a vegetarian will eat products that come from animals that are not necessarily the tissue of the animal. For example, they will eat eggs from chickens. They will drink milk from cows. And so that's one of the things that vegetarians do. But vegans will not have anything to do with a product or meat that comes from an animal. So everything that they eat is plant-based. And so those are kind of some of the questions that I have and that I have had in the past. And then just kind of be thinking about that as we read through this article and you learn a little bit more about this idea of lab-grown meat. We're going to continue with that next paragraph, and there are some things that you will be doing with that. So let's continue reading. If only half of it becomes remotely true, it will be one of the most important advancements of the century, said Christopher Gastrodis, founder of the Cellular Agriculture Society, an international nonprofit organization using donations to advance cellular agriculture. This prospect is launching a three-way battle over the future of meat, with factions jockeying to shape government regulation, consumer tastes, and the debate over the social and emotional implications of widespread adoption of alternative meats. Traditional American agriculture, a $176 billion business in 2017, wants to preserve its fundamental business while, in some cases, it dabbles in the future. Giants such as Cargill and Tyson have invested in alt meat companies. The plant-based meat companies, currently getting all the buzz, must convince the world that they're not just for vegans and vegetarians. And the futuristic lab-based meat companies, which perhaps hold the most promise to disrupt the food industry, have to unpack the science for consumers and nudge people past the ick factor. The recent burst in enthusiasm for alternative meat products is striking because industry experts for years have been skeptical about whether they would find acceptance. When they introduced plant-based products, restaurateurs said it looked really promising, but the reorder rate is really slow. Don Close, senior animal protein analyst in North America for Robo AgriFinance, said in a phone interview, it is a negligible percentage of overall sales, and the amount of traction they are getting from the public is small compared to the media attention. Beyond Meat's lively IPO was a strong indication of public sentiment. So too was this week's announcement that Impossible Meat was experiencing a shortage of ingredients it uses to make its plant-based meat, and probably would not be able to meet demands at restaurant chains including White Castle and Red Robin. Plant-based meat alternatives have exploded as a result of two conflicting trends: growing demand for meat and growing fears about meat. Animal agriculture is an expanding economic powerhouse worldwide, driven by growing demand in developed and developing countries. But it is also a source of great concern about public health, worker safety, animal cruelty, and climate change. That's a lot to unpack, but let's unpack a couple of things. So I want to draw your attention to this idea of Beyond Meat's lively IPO. An IPO is the initial public offering. So it's the first time that a company or a stock is made available to the public. So think about that when a company stays private, they don't go public. So an IPO is that initial public offering. It's the first time a company goes public. And so Beyond Meat is going public. And they used the adjective lively. So that means it was alive. There was a lot of interest in that. So think about that. I want you to take a second and do two things. I want you to turn and talk with your neighbor and answer the question, why do you think the reorder rate might be slow? So in one of the paragraphs, when they introduced plant-based products, there's a quote in there that said the reorder rate was really slow of this plant-based meat. So think about that. And I also want you to think about the conflicting information that this section is providing. I'm not going to point out that conflicting information. I want you to find it and identify it with a partner, and you guys talk about that and the idea of why the reorder rate might be slow, and we'll come back and talk in just a second. Okay, before we get started, let's talk about supply and demand. So, supply and demand, if a supply is plentiful and the demand is low, then the price of a product is usually low because there's an abundance of that product. But when there is not as much product and the demand is high, then usually the price of that product will go up. We see that a lot with fuel prices and the different times of the year. Different times of the year, people use more fuel than they do in other parts of the year, so fuel prices go up. So that's that idea of supply and demand. So I hope that you guys had some great conversations about the conflicting information. I want to talk real quick about that. So they talk in this section about plant-based meat, but they're also talking about this idea of, or this company that says it's plant-based, but it's really using the alternative meat. And so if that comes from cells, is that product really plant-based? Or is it both and? Is it a meat product? Or is it a plant product? Or is it an animal plant product combined? So that's something for you to be thinking about as we continue reading. So would these products be safe for your vegans and vegetarians with that information that you now know about vegans and vegetarians? So we're going to continue reading in this next section. As we read, you're going to be turning and talking about a couple of things, so you might want to look at what this question is on the board real quick. So you're going to talk about the annotations for this section. Make sure that you continue annotating, and then I want you to think about what questions you have based on this section, and then you'll be turning and talking with your neighbor about those. So let's continue reading. The World Health Organization and the British medical journal The Lancet this year warned of the dangers of red meat. On Friday, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio said that for environmental reasons, he wanted to phase out processed and red meat served from city hospitals, schools, and correctional facilities. Garden Burger and Tofurkey launched their veggie burgers back in the early 80s. But the concept leaped forward over the past decade with innovations such as Impossible Burger's introduction of heme, a protein from the roots of soy plants that provide a meaty taste. The result is a patty with the mouthfeel of the real deal, something to which earlier plant-based burgers could only aspire. The changes to meat could be even more sweeping once cell-based meat arrives on the market, but like plant-based meat, it will take time. Gastrotatus talks about a revolution, but he is patient in his time frame. He predicts lab-grown meat will replace 50% of the global meat consumption by the middle of this century. By the end of the century, Gastrotatus predicts intensive animal agriculture will be phased out entirely and all meat will be grown in factories. Speaking at a recent conference of ranchers and meat experts in College Station, Texas, Gastrotatus cited global population growth projections and increasing per capita meat consumption among countries with a growing middle classes against a backdrop of climate-related changes likely to shift or shrink arable land. I don't believe plant-based has any revolutionary capacity, he said. I don't support it. People like eating animal flesh. They have a psychological disinterest in eating plant-based. And I have yet to meet someone who can make a cell from another kingdom that can taste like an animal cell. According to Gastrotatus, cell-based production uses a live animal's adult muscle stem cells, raising them in a nutrient-rich environment until they take on the look and shape of their desired meat. That is a lot to unpack. I'm going to give you about 5 or 6 minutes to unpack all of your annotations with your reading partner. So I'm going to step out and let you guys talk about this for just a second. Good job. All right, so the next section, or the rest of this, you're going to finish reading with your partner. So you've only got about a page left to read. Don't forget about your annotations, and don't forget to talk about those with your partner as you read together. So I'll give you some time, and then we'll come back together and talk about what we've read. All right, you guys unpacked a lot of information, and I'm really proud of you for the conversations that you had. And there's a lot of information that you probably don't have a clue what this thing is talking about. But with a partner, you have been able to talk about these things and get more information that you may not have really understood before. So having a partner to talk about these things with probably helps a lot in understanding. So here's my quick question for you. How many of you have had the Impossible Whopper? I have not. After teaching this unit, the jury is still out. I don't know if I personally can eat that idea of this meat grown in a lab. But to each their own. And that's the point of this article, is there are so many different perspectives on the hows and the whys. We can have vegetarians, we can have vegans. We all have our own opinions about what we ingest in our bodies, and it's okay to not agree with each other. And that is the underlying message of all of this, is you're not wrong in any of those. So, all right, we're going to move along. There are a couple of things that I need you to do. I want you to do a quick write. So on page 1, the author states, this prospect is launching a 3-way battle over the future of meat, with factions jockeying to shape government regulation, consumer tastes, and the debate over the social and environmental implications of widespread adoption of alternative meats. So those 3 factions are real meat, plant-based meat, and cell-based meat. So think about that 3 different factions that are kind of fighting over this. So I want you to write, in a 3-way battle, what is the argument of each faction? Use evidence from this article as your evidence. So think about those 3 different factions and think about the pros and the cons of each. What is their argument for real meat? What is the argument for plant-based meat? What is the argument for cell-based meat? Give you about 5 or 6 minutes to go back in this article and find that information. Great job. And I want you to hold on to those thoughts. I don't want you to talk about those just yet. Okay, so maybe when you leave the classroom today, you can talk about those things. So the next thing that we want to do today is to layer your writing. So yesterday, you had information from that infographic, and today you've gotten a lot of information from this topic of lab-grown meat and what that idea is from farm to table. So you're going to take all of the writing that you've had and those thoughts that you had yesterday. We started with just your opinion about lab-grown meat, and then we went into that infographic, and you got a lot of information about the health benefits, about the environmental effects. You had a lot of information yesterday that you unpacked from your article, and then today you've got additional information. So we're going to layer your writing. We're going to add to your initial thoughts. So to add to those thoughts, you want to look at the article or a specific quote from the article makes you question or wonder. And so you would say, this article makes me wonder, blah, blah, blah. It makes me wonder if this product is safe for vegans or vegetarians. Now that you've read this, you may have a change of thought. So I was thinking this, but now I'm thinking that. Originally, I was thinking that this would be a really good idea because of the environmental effects, but now that I'm thinking about it after reading this article, I'm thinking that maybe the environmental implications aren't as bad as I thought yesterday. So that's another thought. So that's changing your opinion, changing your ideas, or questioning those. You may not have had a complete change of ideas or thoughts, but maybe you're beginning to think about another side of the argument. Or it could be that everything in this article confirmed your original thoughts. So just as I was thinking yesterday, now I'm thinking, or I'm still thinking, and whatever it is that you're thinking. So make sure that when you are layering your writing, when you're providing your thoughts, that you keep the evidence from the article as your evidence, not just your opinion. So you want to support your opinion with the evidence from the text. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to layer your writing. Great job. That is all that we have for today, and tomorrow we will be reading another article to get a little bit more information. And I think that if you don't have the ick factor yet, you probably won't, and so that's a good idea. And if you have the ick factor, it's probably going to stick with you for the rest of this unit. But until tomorrow, happy reading.